So now I'm ready to start on the glass that we transferred using the transfer paper. But before I can start with the glass, I have to do a couple things beforehand. First of all, I'm going to need a new color added to my palette. In this case, this color is called Payne's Gray, P-A-Y-N-E_S gray. And so I'm going to pick a new well. I will bring this around to give you some for your palette. This one's a little stubborn. Anytime you have a tube that won't open, you can use the pliers, or I will use the pliers to try to help you loosen the lid. This is a great color. It's almost like a super dark midnight blue, but it is a gray. So that would be the color that we're going to be using to complete the cup, because we don't have a black on purpose in the set, because usually tube blacks tend to be very flat in color, and this is a kind of almost like a blue black. It's a much richer color. So before we can start, we want to make sure that we have that new color on our palette, and then the next step is to mask out anything that's going to stay white of our cup. And the photograph that you received that shows the actual image that we're working from shows that there are a couple little spots of light. This center mark in the top rim, and then there are 4 little round dots in the base of the cup. So in order to mask those, we're going to be working with a masking fluid pen. And this has 3 separate lids. Don't undo this one, don't undo that one, only undo the one on the end. So you may need to hold on to this one so it doesn't unscrew. And you'll find that the lid is very unique, and that the lid has a metal pin that fits down inside the tube to hopefully help it from clogging. So this opening is very tiny, so it allows only a small amount to come out at a time. And don't squeeze the bottle. You might need to squeeze it slightly, but just know that it's going to come out. You can kind of use the tip to sort of pull the fluid, but you'll see it's like a little bubble that sits on the surface. And I'm going to hit those 5 little spots, and that's all I need to do. At this point, I'll be putting the lid back on. Make sure that you insert the metal post into the opening, and then screw that lid back on, and then this goes back in the bin on my desk. I like to keep those up by me because I do have to unclog them regularly. So that's that. So this has to dry completely, so try to keep your fingers and hands out of this. It will dry, and it's actually a liquid latex, so it's going to dry to almost like the consistency of like a rubber band or like rubber cement, if you've ever used that. It does have a stinky smell, so if you smell something stinky, that's the masking fluid. So if it gets on your hands, just make sure you wash your hands with soap and water. It comes off, but it's just a little smelly. So if you smell something funny on your hands, that's probably what it is. So anyway, those 5 dots, and then let it dry, and then we'll be ready to move on and begin painting our cup. So at this point, my masking fluid has dried. I've got my 5 little spots, and I'm ready to begin working with the grayscale to create the cup. So as you can see, the background is divided into a very dark section and a light section, and then there are lots of grays within the glass. You can see I chose to mark out just a few of the white spots that are found through there, and there's one little spot up here in the center. There's a couple over here, but I did not include those in my drawing. You can see there's lights and darks all throughout the rings that are found in the bottom of the glass. There's also a small cast shadow. All of those things will be addressed through the layering that we'll be doing with the grayscale paint. This is a finished painting of the cup. This is what we're hoping to end up with, something similar to this. You can see it's not quite as much detail as what's in the photograph, but it definitely gives the feeling of the glass. It feels transparent, and it definitely uses the grayscale that we've been working with. So we are going to start with the very lightest value first. And in the cup, that's the picture here, this background area doesn't get any paint, but the rest of the image does. So this is the lightest gray color. This is the lightest gray color that I'm going to use. So this is actually a color. It's lighter than, or it's 1 step darker than the white. So you can see it is slightly more of a color than this. So just a very, very, very pale gray. So I'm going to be working with the largest brush in your set, which is the number 8 round. and it's going to hold a lot of pigment. So I'm going to grab a little bit of the gray paint. Now that's too dark, so I'm going to add a little more water to it, lighten it up considerably. And this is going to be the color that goes over everything with the exception of the area outside the cup. We don't want any paint in that area. Now if you go to put your paint on and you think, oh, that looks softly dark, you can always grab just a brush full of water and blend over it so that you can lighten it just a bit. Now that won't work if you let the paint dry. So if you fret over it for too long, it's going to dry. So you can just grab water to try to help pull that color around. And again, I want to get that pale color on everything except for that little background section. So at this point, this first layer has dried completely, so I'm ready to make a second layer. And this color should be a little bit deeper. That's probably too dark. So I'm gonna add more water. It's looking a little better. And this color is going to go everywhere except for the top line of the edge of the cup up here. I'm not gonna put any of this color in there. It's not going to go anywhere in this space, and it's not going to go anywhere in this circle shape, which also goes down into this part of the cup. So I'm not going to go in any of those places. But I am going to take this color up in all of the other spaces of the glass. So you can see this is one step darker than what's already on there. And again, if you start off and you're like, ooh, it's too dark, you can always take a brush with a little bit of water, move that around. Now, I'm still working with the 8 round, but you might think, oh, this brush is too big, I'm having trouble getting into the spaces. If that is the case, certainly you can try working with maybe your 6 or even your 4 if it's starting to get more difficult to stay in the spaces. Depending on your brush control and how much painting you maybe have done before, or how careful you can be, it really depends on your style. But I want to make sure that I am avoiding that top edge of the cup in the rim and not getting any of this color in there. At this point, I'm ready to add the third layer of value. At this point, I have the paper, the white of the paper, the first value present in these 3 areas, this little skinny strip here, this large area, and the base. And then I've layered the third value on the rest of the space. So now I'm ready to start to look at the individual spaces that might get a little bit darker. And I have my photograph here for reference, and I can start to look at that. I also have a finished painting of the cup that I can look at. Obviously, these areas that are super dark are going to get a layer, but then also I need to look at the spaces in between and see where I may need to keep the color that's there and where I can layer a next value. So I've got my palette set up here, and I'm just getting some of my Payne's Gray, and I'm adding water. I need to get 1 step darker value than this, so it's going to be slightly darker, but not super dark yet. I don't want it to be as dark as, say, this value yet. I'm not there. So it's going to be more like this intermediate space there. All right, so definitely I know I need to put this darker value across the whole top section. I did want to note also that I have moved to a number 4 brush, which is going to be slightly smaller than my number 6 that I was using before. Probably I could use a 6 for this upper area just because it's larger, but I'm going to stick with the 4 for now. So I do want to get 1 step darker in value. And like I said before, if you start painting and you're like, ooh, that's too dark, you can always just add a little water on your brush and brush it out. But you can see this is a step darker than what's already there. So I know I'm within the right range. And in addition to the background space, I definitely want to darken the interior of the cup that has the dark background showing through it. So above this interior line, as you can see, that space, this is the background as it gets bowed from passing through the glass. This section is actually the dark background showing through in that area. So I know that this pencil mark that runs through there is the divider between those two spaces. So I'm going to darken that space. Now this is looking a little darker than that outer space, so I'm just going to get a brush full of water. See if I can blend that out just a bit. Doesn't have to match exactly at this point because it's going to get another layer darker anyway, but I don't want it to be too far, just because I'll be comparing spaces to each other and I don't want to have that too dark for the comparison purposes. All right, so now that I have this next darker value here and here, now I need to start looking at my photograph and the actual painting to see where I can increase the value. And I definitely think I need to step up the value in this little skinny space right in here. And this is one of the reasons why I moved to a smaller brush, is because I knew I would be working into these very small areas as I paint. So along this edge next to where the masking fluid is, there are little segments of color in there, and I definitely want those the next step darker. So that goes along in there. And then also I'm noticing that the 2 curving edges on each side get another level of dark in there. So there's these 2 little crescent moon shapes on each side of the top of the cup. Those are going to get that darker value here and here. And then these little drop down sections here on each side are actually the next level of darkness as well. And then it looks like down here in the base, I'm going to keep this long skinny shape in the middle, but I'm going to darken around it. So this section here. And as you're painting this and you're looking at the photograph, just know that eventually you're going to be working from a photograph of the objects that you choose to paint. So you're going to have to break down the spaces into these segments based on the values that you see in your subject matter. In this one, I've kind of given you the drawing that you need to start from. So you had a place of reference for the shapes that were made, but when you're working from your own photo, you're going to have to do that thinking yourself and decide where you want these values to arrive. So what shapes you're going to use, what values they're going to be, you'll have to make those decisions. So this again is a learning skill builder exercise where you're actually going to be learning how to work with the layered values, but you're going to be translating that for yourself when we're working on our actual project. So this is just the practice to get ready for that project. All right, so that section gets this next step darker. Now down here in this little area, that top kind of this top skinny space, this gets that darker value. Leaving that lower section the color it already is. The side sections on the bottom here, just like the top, get the next step darker. It's a bit dark. I'm just going to brush it out with a little bit of water. Now it's fine. Get this last section over here. All right, so now I need to look at the base area. The center of this kind of donut shape at the base is definitely going to get that next step darker. Again, that looks a little dark to me. So that gets that darker. And then when I look at the shapes on the side, it looks like this little section here, that gets that value. The bottom edge of this. And you'll see that the shapes that I'm painting may not necessarily have an outline around them from our tracing, but those value shapes, I could never trace all of the value shapes that are found in this cup. I had to pick the major ones, and then the rest of them we'll have to layer in without the lines being there and just using our picture as reference. So I'm kind of starting to begin to go within the spaces that we've established, but also beginning to define the areas and the values that are there based on what my eye sees in the photograph, not necessarily just what is seen by the outlines that we drew. All right, so that's slightly darker than the other parts, but it's all right. All right, so it looks like I need to get a little bit darker value over here. This little section in here gets darker. This section here. Again, that's a little dark, so I'm going to try to lighten it some with just some water.